So my name is the Reverend Shuna Boddy, and I'm the Vicar of Brookland and Fairfield. But I'm actually non-stipendiary, so I work full-time outside of the church and do this in a voluntary capacity, but still ordained as a vicar. So that's quite unusual and gets quite interesting at times. My background, I married a local farmer, which is what brought me back to Kent. And for many years, 20 odd years, I've spent a long time with Paralympic sports. So spent much of my time going around with a wheelchair fencing team that I was manager of for many years, which was very interesting, and ended up getting an MBE for my services, which was even better. But yeah, it's two very small parishes. Technically, it's one parish, Brookland and Fairfield. But we get a good interest from visitors. So I think it's not only the ministry of the people that come to worship, but actually it's the ministry of the visitors that come from many different countries and come back as well, which is really great. So yeah, that's me really. So we're sat in Brookland at the moment. Most of the Marsh churches were built around 1200, and this being no exception. The difference with Brookland is that we have a separate bell tower, so the bell tower isn't above the church on a roof, it's next door to it. So there's various reasons why that may be. One of the most popular is that the church couldn't take the weight of a bell tower and bells. Slightly confused about that one because that would apply to lots of churches across the Marsh. But in actual fact, when you go into the bell tower, there's a wooden structure, and they think it is a wooden structure with a bell outside to the elements, which was a flood warning, and in time that became encased and became the bell tower. So I think there's truth in both of those stories, but it'd make much more sense than that. And on top of the bell tower, there's a wyvern, which is like a bird-like dragon, which has been there since about 1700, I think, and that's thought to ward off evil, which is quite funny to have in the church, really. But it sits up there proudly. Inside the church here, the things of note are the double pulpit. So you have a pulpit where we tend to do the Bible readings from, the lectern bit where we do the Bible readings from and then preach from the top pulpit, together with a sounding board, which for years was the table at the back of the church till we realised it actually belonged up there as a sounding board. So obviously it bounces the sound back into the congregation. Main feature inside the church are box pews, which at one point was quite common, but most churches have ripped them out because when they were built, the importance was hearing the word of God, and it didn't matter what you saw. So we've kept them. We actually find them quite useful, especially if there's little toddlers. They can actually crawl around without getting lost or disturbing anything, really. And at the back we have a lead font, which they think is of French descent, possibly was in another church before it came here. And again, the unusual thing about that is there's signs of the zodiac as the calendar, and under each sign is a picture like harvesting the labours throughout the year, really. So they're the main features. There's a plaque on the wall which has got about 10 members of one family that died, all under the age, all very young children. I happened to meet a descendant of the family, and he thinks they had like what they called the Marsh fever. But it's actually quite tragic when you look at the dates and the ages. And bizarrely, the parents outlived all the children. So they're the main features, I think. we're now in the Bell Tower, as most people know it, but the local people know it as the pop-up pub, because 4 times a year we have a bar in the Belfry, which came about when the local pub shut down. Great way of raising funds, and it's a really good community event. So literally the bar is literally just there, and people mingle around here and outside. So our next one will be the 13th of September, which will be the last one for the year, because it gets cold after that. So come along and have a pint, be good. We always have Romney Marsh beer as well. But anyway, back to the bell tower. They think originally it was a square structure open to the elements with one bell, which was a flood warning, around about the same time as East Gulford up the road near Rye flooded. But in time it became encased. Over time it became octagonal, which is quite unusual. And it has 6 bells. The oldest of the bells is 1685. And we still have bell ringers ring for us once a month, but we get a lot of visiting bell ringers. So if there's any bell ringers out there, any campanologists out there, give us a ring and come along and ring in probably the most unusual bell tower that you'll see, although I'm biased totally. So yeah. We have what is known as a hod, and basically it's an umbrella. So when the vicar used to go out and do a funeral and it was raining, he didn't want his wig to get wet, so the hods were made, and some poor people had to carry out the hod, put it by the graveside, and the vicar would stand in the hod to keep dry. So yeah, probably the first umbrella. Then over here we have the tithe. So people used to have to pay a tithe, which was a tenth of their corn or whatever. And these are all the weights which were measured each year to make sure they are accurate. And moving on from the tithes and the weights, back here the penned area is known as the tithe pen, because that's where all the weighing and stuff went on. And then in front of this chest, they believe came from one of the boats that sank in the Spanish Armada. So lots of history just in a little end.